Welcome to a video on inverse functions. So what is an inverse function? Well, we'll be able to represent it by f to the minus 1 of x. Please don't confuse that with the inverse function, which would be f of x or to the minus 1. So this is an inverse function. It exists if a function is 1 to 1, and the identity works if f of minus 1 of the function equals f of the inverse function, and when you substitute them both in, you end up with x. How do you find the inverse function? Well, you interchange x and y in all parts of the equation, you make y the subject, and you change y for f of minus 1 of x. So let's have a look at, given a function, how we find the inverse and show that each function is an identity function. So one is an inverse or the identity of the other. So start with y equals 3x plus 2, interchange your x and your y, solve for y. So subtract the 2 and divide by the 3. So that's the inverse function. How do we show that each function is an identity? Well, we sub each function into the other one. So the f of minus 1, so the inverse function is x over 3 minus 2/3. And so if I sub the function in for the x values, so notice where all the x values are, I'm going to sub in 3x plus 2. So I end up with, when I simplify that, I end up with x. So let's start with the function first, and then we're going to substitute in the inverse. So everywhere there's an x, we're going to sub x over 3 minus 2/3. So when you expand the brackets and simplify, you get x. So when we restrict sometimes we need to restrict the domain so the inverse is a function. So what we need to be an inverse is we need it to be 1 to 1. But if a function is many to 1, that means that we'll need to restrict the domain to make it 1 to 1. So one of our regular functions, the parabola x squared, that is many to 1. So it's a function, but its inverse is not a function because the inverse would be plus or minus the square root of x. So it would be a sideways parabola. So if we were to restrict the domain of the original function to x greater than or equal to 0, so just the positive concave up section, and this changes the function to 1 to 1, and hence the inverse function is just the square root of x, and that is also a function. Thank you.